Hello, cherished listeners, and welcome back to the channel. We're so glad you've joined us for another journey into a heartfelt tale. If you enjoy stories that touch your soul, please consider hitting that subscribe button and leaving a comment below to let us know where in the world you're re-listening from. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let's begin our story, Where the Master Sleeps, A Dog's Vigil. Barnaby was an old dog, his muzzle dusted with white, his once taut muscles softened by the years. A golden retriever with a heart as golden as his coat used to be, he lay curled on the worn rug, his large, dark eyes fixed on the empty armchair. It wasn't just any armchair, it was Arthur's chair. His master's chair, the scent of pipe tobacco, old books, and Arthur himself still clung to the faded fabric, a phantom presence that both comforted and tormented Barnaby. For weeks now, the chair had been empty, a gaping hole in the fabric of their quiet, predictable life. Arthur had been a man of gentle routines. Morning walks through the dewy park, followed by a shared breakfast, a slice of toast for Arthur, a bowl of kibble for Barnaby, often with a little something extra snuck in from Arthur's plate. Afternoons were for naps in the sun-drenched living room, Barnaby's head resting on Arthur's slippered feet, the rhythmic creak of Arthur's rocking chair a lullaby. Evenings were the best, though. Arthur would read by the glow of the reading lamp, his soft voice murmuring tales of faraway lands or forgotten heroes. Barnaby nestled close, absorbing the warmth and the peace. These were the rhythms of their world, a comforting symphony of companionship. But the music had stopped. One day, Arthur hadn't woken up quite right. There had been hushed voices, the hurried arrival of kind, concerned faces, and then the sterile scent of antiseptic. Barnaby had been gently shooed away, his frantic barks and whines unheard amidst the quiet chaos. He remembered the last touch, a fleeting stroke across his head, Arthur's hand trembling slightly. Then Arthur was gone, not just from the room, but from the house. A hollow ache had settled in Barnaby's chest, a constant, dull throb that pulsed with every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. He had waited. He continued to wait. Every morning, he would pad into the kitchen, his tail giving a hopeful, tentative wag, expecting to see Arthur at the counter preparing his tea. Every afternoon, he'd lie by the window, watching the path, anticipating the familiar silhouette. Every evening, he'd position himself by the armchair, his ears perked, listening for the distinctive shuffle of Arthur's slippers, the soft sigh as he settled in. But Arthur never came. The silence in the house grew heavier with each passing day, a blanket of absence that muffled every sound, every hopeful bark. Barnaby's world, once so vibrant and full, had become a canvas painted in shades of longing. He was a sentinel, a guardian of an empty throne, his vigil a testament to a love that knew no end, no surrender. The scent of Arthur, though fading, was his anchor, a whisper of hope that one day his master would simply walk back through the door, his gentle smile lighting up the room once more. Barnaby closed his eyes, his old body twitching faintly as a memory flickered to life behind his eyelids. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind that smelled of fallen leaves and distant bonfires. Arthur, his cheeks ruddy from the cool air, was laughing, a deep, rumbling sound that always made Barnaby's tail thump against the ground. They were in the meadow behind the house, Arthur attempting to fly a kite, a brightly colored dragon that stubbornly refused to soar. Barnaby, a young pup then, full of boundless energy, was leaping and barking, convinced the kite was some magnificent, oversized bird he was meant to herd. Arthur, untangling a string, would glance down, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're a good boy, Barnaby," he'd say, "but not much of a kite chaser, are you?" Those were the golden days, etched into Barnaby's very soul. He remembered the long summer evenings spent on the porch swing, Arthur strumming a worn-out guitar, his voice a little off-key but full of heart, singing old folk songs. Barnaby would lie at his feet, a warm weight against his legs, the music weaving itself into the quiet hum of the night. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the melody, the comfort, the profound connection that flowed between them. Arthur would often pause, his fingers still on the strings, to scratch Barnaby behind the ears, murmuring stories about his own childhood, his adventures, his dreams. Barnaby would listen, head tilted, absorbing every nuance of his master's voice, every shift in his mood. Arthur had been more than just a master. He was a confidant, a playmate, a steady presence. He taught Barnaby how to fetch, not with stern commands, but with patient encouragement and generous praise. He taught him to be gentle, to understand the subtle cues of human emotion. When Arthur was sad, Barnaby would rest his head on his lap, a silent offer of comfort. When Arthur was joyful, Barnaby would mirror his exuberance, a whirlwind of wagging tail and happy barks. Their lives were intertwined, a tapestry woven with shared experiences, unspoken understandings, and an unbreakable bond of affection. Barnaby remembered their daily walks, how Arthur would point out the first robin of spring, the changing colors of the leaves in autumn, the intricate patterns of frost on winter mornings. He'd talk about the history of the old oak tree in the park, or the names of the clouds overhead. For Barnaby, these walks weren't just about exercise. They were lessons, shared explorations of a world made richer by Arthur's commentary. He remembered the feel of Arthur's hand, strong and calloused, yet incredibly gentle, stroking his fur, the warmth seeping into his very bones. These memories were not distant echoes. They were living things, vibrant and real, sustaining Barnaby in the quiet, lonely house. They were the fuel for his unwavering vigil, a constant reminder of the love that bound him to the empty chair, to the absent master. The laughter, the songs, the quiet conversations, they all swirled around him, a comforting yet heart-wrenching symphony of what once was. The silence in the house had become a tangible entity, a heavy cloak that draped over every surface, absorbed every sound. Barnaby, despite his unwavering hope, could feel its oppressive weight. He would pad from room to room, his claws clicking softly on the polished wooden floors, his nose sniffing at every corner, every shadow, searching for that familiar scent, that subtle hint of Arthur's presence. The kitchen, once bustling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon, was now cold and still. The bedroom, usually a sanctuary of soft snores and rustling blankets, lay undisturbed, the bed meticulously made, as if waiting for a guest who would never arrive. Barnaby would sometimes lie at the foot of Arthur's bed, his chin resting on his paws, listening intently. He'd hear the creaks and groans of the old house settling, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the distant chirping of birds, but never the familiar sound of Arthur stirring, of his deep, gentle breath. He tried to trick himself, to imagine the sounds, to conjure Arthur's voice from the depths of his memory. He'd bark once, a soft, questioning sound, then wait, his ears perked, his tail giving a hopeful quiver. Only silence answered him, a silence that echoed the emptiness in his heart. Occasionally, a kind neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, would stop by. She was a woman with soft hands and a gentle voice, who always brought a small tin of dog biscuits and a worried frown. She'd fill Barnaby's food bowl, talk to him in soothing tones, and stroke his head. "Poor old Barnaby," she'd murmur, "still waiting, aren't you?" She'd let him out into the garden, watch him do his business, and then gently usher him back inside. She meant well, Barnaby knew, but her presence only highlighted Arthur's absence. Her scent was not Arthur's scent. Her voice was not Arthur's voice. She couldn't fill the void. Barnaby's vigil wasn't just about waiting. It was about holding on to the essence of Arthur, preserving the memory of their life together. He'd guard Arthur's slippers, which still sat by the empty armchair, their leather worn smooth from years of use. He'd sniff at Arthur's old pipe, left on the mantelpiece, inhaling the faint, comforting aroma. He never disturbed anything, treating each object as a sacred relic, a piece of his master that remained. The days blurred into weeks, and the seasons began to turn. The vibrant greens of summer faded into the rich golds and reds of autumn, and the air grew colder, sharper. Each change in the outside world served as a stark reminder of the unchanging stillness within the house. Barnaby's loyalty was a beacon in the encroaching gloom, a silent promise that he would not abandon his post, not as long as there was breath in his body. He would wait. He would always wait. One blustery afternoon, as the first flakes of snow began to dance outside the window, Barnaby was startled by a persistent tapping at the kitchen door. He lifted his head from his paws, his ears swiveling, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Mrs. Henderson, her cheeks rosy from the cold, a basket covered with a checkered cloth in her hand. She let herself in with a spare key, a worried smile on her face. "Barnaby, you old dear," she cooed, kneeling to scratch his favorite spot behind the ears. "You must be getting lonely." She opened the basket, revealing a steaming bowl of rich, meaty stew. Barnaby's tail gave a hesitant wag. It smelled wonderful, far better than the dry kibble he'd been slowly picking at. Mrs. Henderson placed the bowl on the floor, and Barnaby, after a moment's hesitation, began to eat with a slow, deliberate relish. As he ate, Mrs. Henderson moved through the house, checking the thermostat, closing curtains against the gathering dusk. She spoke to him softly, telling him about her day, about the antics of her own cat, Mittens, about the changing weather. She didn't try to fill Arthur's shoes, but she offered a different kind of comfort, a gentle human presence that broke through the oppressive silence, even if just for an hour. Barnaby found himself looking forward to her visits. They were brief respites, moments where the weight of his vigil lightened, if only slightly. He'd greet her with a soft bark and a slower, more confident wag of his tail. She became a bridge to the outside world, a reminder that warmth and kindness still existed beyond the four walls of Arthur's house. During these visits, Barnaby would sometimes catch a glimpse of himself in the polished surface of the old grandfather clock. An old dog, his eyes still bright with purpose, but his movements a little slower, his coat a little duller. He knew he was aging, just as the house was aging, settling deeper into its quiet solitude. The seasons continued their relentless march. Autumn had fully given way to winter, blanketing the garden in a pristine layer of white. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood children playing had ceased, replaced by the hushed quiet of snow. Yet Barnaby's dedication never wavered. He would spend hours at the window, watching the snowflakes fall, each one a tiny, ephemeral ghost. He imagined Arthur, wrapped in his heavy coat, walking through the snow, perhaps carrying a bag of treats. The image was vivid, almost real, a comfort he clung to. He understood, in his canine way, that Arthur wasn't coming back in the way he used to. The visits from Mrs. Henderson, the shared moments of warmth, were a new kind of companionship, but they didn't diminish his primary purpose. He was Arthur's dog, and his place was here, guarding the master's sleep, whatever form that sleep might now take. His loyalty was not a burden. It was a profound, unwavering expression of love, a silent vow whispered to the empty air. Winter deepened, bringing with it a biting cold that seeped into the old house, despite Mrs. Henderson's efforts to keep the heating on. Barnaby found himself sleeping more, his dreams a vivid tapestry of Arthur's presence. He'd dream of long walks through sun-drenched fields, Arthur's hand on his head, his voice a comforting murmur. He'd dream of chasing squirrels in the park, Arthur's joyful laughter echoing through the trees. Sometimes, in his dreams, Arthur would simply be there, sitting in his armchair, a book open on his lap, a warm, familiar presence that filled the emptiness with a profound sense of peace. He'd wake with a start, his heart aching, the reality of the silent, cold house crashing down on him once more. His own body, once so agile and strong, was now a source of constant dull aches. His joints stiffened in the cold, his steps became slower, more deliberate. Getting up from the rug, where he'd spent countless hours, was a labor. He could no longer leap onto the sofa, a cherished privilege Arthur had always indulged. His sight was dimming, his hearing not as sharp as it once was. Yet the flame of his loyalty burned undimmed within him. If anything, the physical discomfort only sharpened his resolve. He would endure. He would wait. For Arthur, Mrs. Henderson's visits became more frequent, and her concern for Barnaby grew. She'd bring extra blankets, place them near the old radiator, coax him to eat, even hand-feed him when his appetite waned. She noticed his labored breathing, the slight tremble in his legs. "You're a good boy, Barnaby," she'd whisper, stroking his thinning fur. "The best boy, but you look so tired." Barnaby would lean into her touch, accepting the comfort, but his gaze would always drift back to the empty armchair, to the framed photograph on the side table. A younger Arthur, arm around a younger Barnaby, both smiling, forever frozen in a moment of pure joy. He understood, as only a creature of instinct and profound emotional intelligence could, that his time, like Arthur's, was drawing to a close. The light within him, though still burning, was flickering. He wasn't afraid. He had lived a good life, a life filled with love, warmth, and purpose. His purpose, even now, was clear: to be there for Arthur in spirit, if not in body. He felt a deep, profound sadness, a yearning that went beyond mere physical presence. It was the yearning for a shared soul, for the unique bond they had forged. The silence no longer felt like an absence. It felt like a sacred space, a hallowed ground where the memory of Arthur resided, and where Barnaby, his faithful sentinel, would remain until his own light finally faded, joining his master in the quiet, comforting embrace of eternity. His vigil was a final, beautiful act of devotion, a testament to a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. One morning, the winter sun, weak but persistent, streamed through the living room window, painting streaks of pale gold across the worn rug. Barnaby, curled in his usual spot beside the empty armchair, felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The aches in his old body seemed to have receded, replaced by a gentle warmth. He opened his eyes, and for a moment he thought he saw him. Not a clear vision, but a shimmering, translucent form in the armchair. A silhouette of Arthur, his gentle smile clear as day. A soft, familiar scent, stronger than it had been in months, filled the air: pipe tobacco, old books, and the comforting essence of his master. Barnaby let out a soft sigh, a sound of deep contentment. He didn't try to bark, didn't try to move. He simply watched, his eyes shining with an ancient wisdom, a profound understanding. The Arthur in the chair seemed to nod, a silent acknowledgement, a final loving glance. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the shimmer faded, leaving only the sun-drenched, empty chair, but the peace remained. Barnaby knew with uncertainty that resonated deep within his soul that Arthur was truly at rest, and that their bond, though change, was unbroken. His vigil, he realized, had not been about bringing Arthur back, but about honoring the love they shared, about keeping his spirit alive in this house they had built together. Later that day, Mrs. Henderson arrived, her steps tentative, her face etched with a familiar concern. She found Barnaby still in his spot, his head resting peacefully on his paws, a faint, contented smile on his old face. He looked utterly at peace, as if he had finally, truly, found what he had been waiting for. Mrs. Henderson knelt, her eyes welling up, and gently stroked his fur. "You waited, old friend," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You truly waited." She stayed with him for a long time, sharing the quiet space, honoring the unspoken promise Barnaby had kept. Eventually, she made arrangements. Barnaby was laid to rest in the garden beneath the old oak tree that Arthur had loved so much, where they had spent countless hours together. It was a place of memory, a place where the laughter still echoed in the rustling leaves, where the sunlight still dappled the grass in patterns that reminded one of Arthur's gentle hand. The house, though empty now, no longer felt desolate. It was imbued with the spirit of enduring love, a testament to the quiet, unwavering devotion of a dog to his master. Barnaby's Vigil, a silent epic of loyalty, had reached its tender conclusion. His spirit, free and unburdened, now ran through endless sunlit fields, forever reunited with the gentle hand of his master Arthur. Their story, Where the Master Sleeps, A Dog's Vigil, became a whispered legend in the quiet corners of the neighborhood. A reminder that some bonds are forged so strong they transcend even the finality of death, living on as a beautiful eternal song in the heart